Alright guys, the moment you've been waiting for is finally here. Today I will be counting down the top 50 roller coasters I have ever ridden. If you guys remember last year, I uploaded a top 50 coasters list for my first time, and the video performed quite well on the channel. Unfortunately, that video is now removed from the platform due to copyright reasons, which is unfortunate because it would have been really fun to compare the old list to the new list. With that being said, I've got my updated one and I'm so excited to share it with you all. There are a couple of disclaimers before we dive in. The first is that this is all my personal opinion and that I completely understand if you have some different preferences. Always know that you are more than welcome to drop your rankings and thoughts down in the comments, and I'll try to respond to as many of them as I can. Also, it's probably important to note that I haven't even touched Europe, Asia, and Australia yet, and I still have some major parks to get to in North America. Parks that stand out in North America with rides that could have made this list include Kings Island, Holiday World, Kentucky Kingdom, both Great Americas, Mount Olympus, and numerous others including chain and independent parks. I do still have a couple smaller coaster trips planned for the rest of the 2021 season, but all of the big ones are out of the way, which is why I think now is a good time to make this video. Of course, there will be a further updated top 50 list next year when I have gotten out to more of North America's major parks and possibly some outside the continent. For now though, I do hope you all enjoy this list. Real quick, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already, guys, and let's dive right in. These are the top 50 roller coasters I've ever ridden. Number 50, Superman Ride of Steel at Six Flags America. In my eyes, this is one of the most underrated hypercoasters around. I'm sure everything I'm about to say will apply to the Ride of Steel over at Darien Lake too, but seriously guys, this is an awesome cloned ride. I absolutely love the speed and low-to-the-ground nature of the layout, even if it is rather unconventional. I also love the super solid moments of airtime sprinkled throughout the course, including the sustained ejector moment on this incredible camelback mid-ride. Without a doubt, this is Six Flags America's best roller coaster, along with Maryland's, and I think coaster enthusiasts need to stop sleeping on it. Number 49, Volcano the Blast Coaster at King's Dominion. To this day, I'm still saddened that this incredible launch coaster is no longer around with us. Still, the legacy of the ride sits in my memories, especially when I think of my one front row ride I got on this thing. The launches were phenomenal, really the entire first half was phenomenal, and the rolls in the second half were really fun too. It sucks that this ride is getting close to falling on my top 50, but nonetheless, I will always remember this incredible defunct roller coaster. Number 48, Monster at Adventureland. This Gerstlauer Infinity Coaster is what I deem to be the best Gerstlauer in America after just one ride. I instantaneously fell in love with Monster's layout with the immaculate hang time, great positive Gs, solid but quirky pacing, and a very smooth ride experience. Plus, getting to appreciate the elements with just a little lap bar, unlike something like TMNT Shellraiser at American Dream Mall, which just barely missed the list, was a serious treat. This is without question the best coaster in all of Iowa. Number 47, Steel Eel at SeaWorld San Antonio. Originally, I had Texas Stingray over this Morgan Mini Hyper, but after giving it some thought, I think Steel Eel is the more crazy ride. The Flojector airtime, and I really mean Flojector airtime, is just tons of fun, being repeated over and over again on every hill. For me personally, this is the true star of SeaWorld San Antonio now, and one of the best rides manufactured by Morgan ever. Number 46, Storm Runner at Hersheypark. I got to ride this coaster for the first time in 2018, and finally, after waiting numerous years, I was able to check it out again in 2021. And I think I forgot just how powerful this ride is. It absolutely has zero dead spots in my opinion. You've got your crazy intense launch, awesome top hat and drop, crazy unique inversions, and a killer finale with those snappy low turns. Absolutely, I love Storm Runner. What a fantastic intimate creation and one of the best rides in the park. Number 45, Accelerator at Knott's Berry Farm. From one intimate to another, this coaster has an even wilder launch than Storm Runner that takes riders from 0 to 82 miles per hour in 2.3 seconds. This is easily one of the best launches on any coaster in the world. In addition, the two overbank turns afterwards may not have been as inspired as Storm Runner's inversions, but I still find myself graying out on every ride. Not gonna lie, I have to start being more appreciative to have Accelerator so close to home. Number 44, Canobie at Lagoon. At first glance, this ride seems like it would be a Gerstlauer or something, but no, it's actually a fully in-house creation. This means that Lagoon built this ride themselves, and how they came up with some of these elements is beyond me. Try one of the steepest beyond vertical drops in the world at 116 degrees taken from hypercoaster heights, and a stretched out implement, a crunched up dive loop, and the world's only Lagoon roll. Canobie is all sorts of messed up, and I absolutely loved every second of it, marathoning it 26 times when I visited the park last year. Number 43, Prowler at Worlds of Fun. Out of all the coasters at this park, this was the one that left a lasting impression on me. I'm not sure why Prowler gets so minimal recognition in the coaster community, but this ride is a powerhouse from start to end. With the exception of a little section towards the middle, you don't seem to slow down one bit, and what you've got sprinkled in the layout is some of GCI's finest turns, airtime hills, and transitions. Prowler is a fully complete terrain wooden roller coaster to me. What a ride. Number 42, Afterburn at Carowinds. Again, I'm not sure why this ride gets so little attention amongst coaster enthusiasts, but Afterburn brings the intensity nearly to the extent of Montu at Busch Gardens Tampa, which seems to get a lot of praise. I'd even go as far as to say that this coaster has some of the most sustained positives and best overall pacing of any invert in the world. Also, bonus points go out to the Batwing element, which, like Montu's, is one of 2 on a B&M invert and is extremely punchy. So in conclusion, this is a snappy, underrated invert that is definitely one of the bigger standouts at Carowinds. Number 41, Copperhead Strike, also at Carowinds. This Mock Rides multi-launch coaster immediately became my favorite mock roller coaster when I came off, but spoiler alert, that was before I'd ride Time Traveler at Silver Dollar City around a month later. Nonetheless, this coaster does just about anything you could want one of Mock's launch coasters to achieve. You've got your hang time, you've got your air time, you've got your positives, snappy transitions, theming, and the list goes on. Dare I say, Copperhead Strike turned out to be a perfect roller coaster for what it's worth. Number 40, Thunderhead at Dollywood. Easily one of the most intense GCIs in the country, this coaster gets better as it charges through the layout. Most coasters, and even some GCI, seem to lose steam as they get closer to the final brake run, but that is not at all the case with Thunderhead. I absolutely love the layout of this ride so much. I love its airtime, laterals, transitions, and it even has a little bit of terrain usage. In my personal opinion, Dollywood could not have built a better wooden roller coaster with the space limitations they had to work with. An absolutely phenomenal GCI coaster. Number 39, New Texas Giant at Six Flags Over Texas. This ride may be the tamest of the RMC coasters I've ridden, but does that mean it isn't an awesome ride? Of course not. New Texas Giant still offers a plethora of sustained airtime moments with a super long ride time and a pretty cool theme. Most of all, it impresses me that RMC, or Rocky Mountain Construction, was able to build a coaster this good on their first attempt. The fact that this is the worst of their coasters that I've ridden and it still cracks my top 40 should be considered a truly incredible statement. Number 38, Alpengeist at Busch Gardens Williamsburg. Talk about a ride that's got more speed than it knows what to do with. Because this ride is so large, it's got so much speed to burn off in the first half to the point where some of these elements feel dangerous. My personal favorite is the Cobra Roll, which is the snappiest and all-time favorite Cobra Roll for me at the moment. Unfortunately, Alpengeist does slow down quite a bit in the second half, but if anything, it is a breather for the stupidly intense first half that you had just experienced. Number 37, Superman the Ride at Six Flags New England. I'm not gonna lie, this is one of the few coasters I've ridden that I've found to be a bit overrated. It really could afford to have much better restraints and also some more speed in the second half, which by the way didn't seem to be a fluke, it's apparently always like that. What I will say is the first half is impeccable with tons of sustained ejector airtime, and if the ride kept the pacing of the first few elements up in the second half, this ride would be perfection. And you know, give it better restraints as I said. But I think Superman the Ride has a lot of potential to be better than it currently is. With that being said though, I was still able to get a serious kick out of this incredible ride. Please remember that it still cracks my top 40. It's still an awesome experience. Number 36, Mr. Freeze Reverse Blast at Six Flags Over Texas. Contrary to what most will tell you, I do not consider New Texas Giant to be the best coaster at Over Texas. That honor instead goes to Mr. Freeze, one of the best shuttle coasters and one of the best cloned coasters in the world. Riding this thing in the front row made for some ridiculous positive G-forces, crazy fast speeds and pacing, and somehow even some airtime. I definitely can't wait to get back to this park for more, or get out to Six Flags St. Louis in the near future for its clone, which by the way, if you've ridden that one, then you can probably substitute that for my number 36 spot on this list. More or less, these two rides are the exact same. But yeah, Mr. Freeze, awesome ride. Number 35, Aftershock at Silverwood. Talk about a crazy shuttle coaster. I know we just talked about Mr. Freeze, but this ride really brings in the intensity. Because of the way the ride works, you can be riding in the back row for a more intense first half and the front row for a more intense second half with additional wind in your face. But no matter where you sit on this ride, expect a pretty wild ride experience. This ride is ridiculously intense and I still stand by Aftershock being one of the most surprising roller coasters I may have ever ridden. Number 34, Incredible Hulk at Universal's Islands of Adventure. I'll be honest, I didn't expect the ride to rank as high as it did, but all I needed was one back row ride and the second most sustained grail moment I've ever experienced, just behind Intimidator 305's first turn at King's Dominion. From there on out, I was hooked and I cannot wait to get back to Florida to ride it some more. It's a disorienting blur in the first half, not as wild in the second, but still fun, but come on, you've gotta love the package that this coaster does offer. Number 33, Hagrid's Magical Creatures Motorbike Adventure, also at Universal's Islands of Adventure. Aside from needing a much better name, this ride brings in a themed, immersive experience combined with a super long layout with many tricks up its sleeve. Talk about a drop track, a reverse freefall spike with a backward section, dark ride portions, on-ride audio, and get this, 7 LSM launches. That is more than any other roller coaster in the world, and when you really think about it, there's no wonder why this coaster is as unreliable of a ride as it is. If you do get the chance to ride Hagrid's, please take it. It can be a bit of a hassle to get on, but I promise it's more than worth it. Number 32, Time Traveler at Silver Dollar City. As I mentioned earlier, this is now my favorite mock rides roller coaster I've ever ridden, and I do not see that changing anytime soon. Also, we were just on the topic of Hagrid's, which truly is a full package for a roller coaster, and Time Traveler is literally the exact same story. You've got some awesome clockwork theming, amazing restraints, and an impeccable layout with launches, inversions, and ejector airtime maneuvers. Plus, this is one of the most re-rideable coasters I've probably ever ridden. Because of the spinning trains, you'll end up with a different experience every ride, which is awesome. There are very few other coasters out there where you can say the same, so definitely try to get multiple rides on this incredible launch coaster. Number 31, Gale Force at Playland's Castaway Cove. To this day, Gale Force remains the most underrated roller coaster I've ever ridden. This ride is seemingly perfect in what it's trying to achieve, but funny enough, it seems like it can't make up its mind in what forces it's trying to pull. Because of the shaping of some of these elements, you get some absolutely wild ejector airtime, including moments of lateral airtime, and you've got some very enjoyable launches as well. I really don't care how this thing used to run when it opened. You've all got to come out here and give Gale Force a chance, because seriously, this ride is running better than it ever has before. Number 30, Montu at Busch Gardens, Tampa. From 2018 to onwards, Montu has been my number one B&M invert I've ever ridden. Until I go overseas, I don't exactly see that changing because this ride has a perfectionist layout. You've got stupidly intense and sustained positive Gs, many whippy inversions, the incredible aforementioned Batwing element, and a bunch of unique and themed trenches. For a while, this was my favorite ride in the park, obviously excluding Gwazi, and although it doesn't hold that title anymore, it's still absolutely an incredible inverted roller coaster. Number 29, Phoenix at Canobie's. The star attraction of the park and one of Pennsylvania's premier thrill rides is this old wooden roller coaster that provides a ride experience that is unlike what you'd expect. Due to the ride's minimal buzz bar restraints, the sheer quantity and quality of the airtime is absolutely absurd. I don't think there is another coaster anywhere that will make you laugh as much just because it's so ridiculous how high up you come out of your seat. Phoenix is such a memorable coaster and such a memorable park, and it's a ride that I recommend all of you to experience at some point in your life. Number 28, Boulder Dash at Lake Compounds. Slightly one-upping Phoenix is another wooden roller coaster I've ridden, this one being the best CCI or Custom Coasters International coaster I've ridden. It also happened to be the only one on the list because Tremors barely missed the cut. Boulder Dash's layout as incorporated into the side of a mountain is one of the strongest and most creative on any wooden coaster out there. In addition, there's some fierce laterals, some wild bursts of ejector airtime, and the coaster runs like a dream. Not too smooth, not too rough, but just exactly what you would want to give a stupidly out of control experience in the woods. So what an awesome wooden coaster this is. Once again, it's a ride I'd recommend all of you to experience in your lifetime. Number 27, Kumba at Busch Gardens, Tampa. I talked about Montu no longer being my number one in the park, and that's because Kumba blew my expectations out of the water this past visit. I just could not believe how intense and how whippy this coaster rides in the back row. From the positive Gs to the pool and the inversions, Kumba is a wild adventure through the back section of Busch Gardens. Truth be told, Bolliger and Mabillard does not make coasters like they used to. Number 26, Mako at SeaWorld Orlando. I am completely in love with this ride, and I'm sure most of you guys who have ridden it can hear me out on this one. Other than the second half, which honestly could afford to be better, I can't say I'd change anything to make Mako a better ride. You've got some of the most sustained floater airtime on the first couple of camelbacks, you've got a crazy awesome speed hill element, you've got some super fast speeds, and the ride even has a soundtrack to build anticipation up the lift hill. Also, this ride runs just as smooth as it did when it first opened, which is always a welcome bonus to any steel roller coaster. With that being said, Mako for the time being is not my favorite B&M hypercoaster, though it does come really close. Number 25, Behemoth at Canada's Wonderland. The last coaster to be featured in part 1 of my top 50 coasters list is a ride that blew my expectations out of the water also. Maybe I just need a re-ride, maybe this coaster was just running extra well, but I remember a quality and quantity of floater that is unparalleled in nearly any coaster I've been on. I also really love that the second half of this ride is much more enjoyable than Mako's second half, which I've made clear I'm really not much of a fan of. Plus, Behemoth happens to have a very similar setting over the water and an equally as impressive color scheme. Whenever the time comes, I look forward to trying this thing out again and seeing if it was just a fluke. Even if it drops below Mako though, I'm sure it'll always sit in my top 50 coasters list. Number 24, Leviathan at Canada's Wonderland. At the time of my visit to this park, I had never ridden a B&M Giga before and thus had nothing to compare it to. Maybe it was because of that, or maybe it was because of the sheer quality of this ride that had me fall in love with Leviathan. This speed machine takes riders through its 5,486 foot long layout with speeds of up to 92 miles per hour, and man can you feel every bit of it. This coaster rockets through its first few elements very similarly to Fury 325 at Carowinds. I had a blast riding Leviathan when I crossed the border into Canada and would highly encourage you guys to make the trek up there for this coaster alone. Number 23, Stunt Pilot at Silverwood. I know a lot of people were skeptical of how this coaster's pacing would look following the testing footage, or at least how it would look relative to the pacing found on the prototype Raptor coasters. Since those rides really set the stage of what these things are capable of, Stunt Pilot had a high bar to clear when it opened, and I can safely say that it goes above and beyond in intensity, pacing, and airtime. I would say that it's slightly less aggressive than the prototypes Wonder Woman Golden Lasso coaster at Six Flags Fiesta Texas and Railblazer at California's Great America, but the ride still hauls ass through a short but sweet course. For me personally, Stunt Pilot was enough to claim the top spot in both Silverwood and the entirety of Idaho. I loved this ride. Number 22, Ghost Rider at Knott's Berry Farm. I feel like every time I get a great ride on this coaster, which keep in mind is pretty frequently, I'm just blown away by the layout. The ride is essentially a cross between a CCI or Custom Coasters International wood coaster and a GCI or Great Coasters International wood coaster. And let's say for certain that Ghost Rider surely rides like it. It's got some phenomenal airtime, some sustained and some abrupt, and it's got some wicked laterals, probably some of the best on any ride in the world. Additionally, the layout is crazy long. So these three things combined are the recipe for a fantastic wooden roller coaster, and this isn't even to mention the fact that the ride runs smooth with that wooden coaster bite to it. So I absolutely adore this ride, and every time I get to Knott's, I'm never getting tired of this thing. Number 21, Phantom's Revenge at Kennywood. This ride is ridiculous, especially in the second half. While the first half focuses on large-scale hills and drops, the second has these demonic little ejector hills that launch you to space with those restraints. I'd personally argue that these few hills give some of the strongest sustained airtime anywhere on planet Earth. Alongside that, the ride follows a super unique terrain layout and is amongst the smoothest roller coasters out of the near 400 I've ridden. So if you couldn't tell, this ride is impeccable, great layout, great airtime, great pacing. What more could you really want? Number 20, Superman El Ultimo Escape at Six Flags Mexico. When I saw this layout in person, I was skeptical that it could be as elite as those who had ridden it said it was. But I was instantaneously proven wrong with one back row ride where my body was being repeatedly ripped apart with sustained lateral forces, sustained ejector airtime, and a shockingly unique layout for a Morgan coaster. Putting it one spot above Phantom's Revenge was a decision I decided to make in order to solidify this ride as the best Morgan roller coaster in the world. It's a statement that I stand by, even if it is hard to imagine from those of you who have only ridden Phantom's Revenge. Nonetheless, this ride has a perfectionist layout and I loved every single second of it. Number 19, Wonder Woman Golden Lasso coaster at Six Flags Fiesta Texas. I mentioned the prototype Raptors being more intense than the newer ones like Stunt Pilot, which is still a crazy ride, but Wonder Woman is what I'm talking about here. I decided to put it a few spots higher because while it is a bit more uncomfortable with those restraints and trains, it's so insanely aggressive and was the definition of a coaster that I just could not stop riding and couldn't get enough of. The reason I wanted to marathon this thing over and over again was just because I felt like what I had just experienced was a big blur every time. So much stuff is happening to your body in such a short amount of time to the point where you'll just be shocked out of proportions if you aren't expecting it. Wonder Woman is a ridiculously fast-paced ride that is not for the faint of heart, but with that being said, I can't wait to try its mirrored clone Railblazer at some point in the not-so-distant future. Number 18, Outlaw Run at Silver Dollar City. While I didn't think as highly of Outlaw Run as many people do, and especially those who rank it as one of the top tier RMCs, my god, it doesn't even matter, this ride is still incredible. It also feels a bit different from the other RMCs, and I'm guessing the way it rides reflects the fact that it's a wooden topper track design and not a steel eye-box design. The best way I would describe Outlaw Run to someone who hasn't ridden it is that it's less about rapid succession like some other RMC coasters, and more about focusing on individual elements when they come along. And it's cool because a lot of these elements are pretty wonky or unique, and they ride just about as good as you could ever want them to ride. I still wouldn't say it's like too much for those prone to intensity though, at least that's what I would think, because it's not as much back to back to back to back. But that aside, I still found this coaster to be intense and amazing, and it's without question the star attraction in the entire state of Missouri for me. Number 17, King Ka at Six Flags Great Adventure. People know this ride for being the tallest and second fastest coaster on our planet. But when I think of King Ka, I think of the unreal adrenaline rush and fast speeds from a front row ride experience. There is simply nothing else like blasting 128 miles per hour, feeling all that wind hit your face, and then rise up a 456-foot tall tower. Oddly enough, coaster enthusiasts tend to hate on King Ka for being rough and uncomfortable, but I hardly find it to be different than Dragster, and the restraints don't even touch my shoulders. So for me, I absolutely love this roller coaster, and please do not pass up on that front row ride experience that I talked about. Number 16, Millennium Force at Cedar Point. A very similar story to King Ka, people know this ride for being the world's first giga coaster, or a roller coaster that stands 300 to 399 feet tall. But rarely ever do enthusiasts praise this ride for its unbelievable front row ride experience. It's another case of a ride that at a point in time was so universally loved that people decided to stop feeding it praise. A similar thing is happening now with Steel Vengeance in the same park. That logic is just something I've never understood. But anyways, the blistering fast speed you feel in this coaster combined with some super sustained floater airtime hills and some underappreciated positive Gs had me fall in love with Millennium Force's layout. I think people need to take a step back nowadays and appreciate this ride for the experience that it has and will continue to offer. It doesn't need to be the most insane coaster in the world to still be an incredible ride. Number 15, Maverick, also at Cedar Point. Seeing as this was the first Intamin Blitz coaster, I think we all got an idea that this model would turn out to be phenomenal. Maverick, the original, is best known for its rapid-fire succession and tossing your body sideways, upwards for airtime, or even downwards for positive Gs. It's an absolutely perfect layout in my opinion, with virtually everything you could ever want in any roller coaster. I know for me, Maverick remains one of, if not the most purely fun and enjoyable coaster I've ever been on, even if it isn't as intense as the coming roller coasters on the list. This is absolutely a must ride when you get to Cedar Point. Number 14, Medusa Steel Coaster at Six Flags Mexico. If you know us enthusiasts well, we all absolutely love Rocky Mountain Construction's iBox design. From here on out, we've got a big fat wave of their rides, starting with Latin America's one and only RMC coaster. This one is a great one too, with some impeccable pacing as it begins to warm up and a fantastic sequence of elements. One thing that Medusa does better than most RMC coasters is flow from one element to another. Even if it doesn't feel as fast paced as some of the other RMCs that we'll talk about in a second, it makes up for all of that in its other unique strong suits. Medusa Steel Coaster made the trek out to Six Flags Mexico worth it by itself. Number 13, Wicked Cyclone at Six Flags New England. Oh my gosh, this ride shocked me this year when I got off from my first ever ride on it. The ride has built up a reputation for running pretty on and off, sometimes ripping through its whole course and other times crawling through the last lap around the structure. I know that when I rode it, which keep in mind many people are starting to say that 2021 is possibly Wicked Cyclone's best year ever, the thing was absolutely flying. It seemed to not slow down at all until the brake run, contrary to what I've heard in the past. All of its elements and all of its ejector airtime moments were executed perfectly too, and for that and its long ride time, how could you not absolutely love Wicked Cyclone? To me, this was a super surprising RMC roller coaster. Number 12, Twisted Colossus at Six Flags Magic Mountain. RMC's lead designer Alan Schilke really came up with the best possible layout for the retrofitted Colossus wood coaster. With two tracks racing side by side, featuring insanely strong airtime moments, great hybrid inversions, and crossovers, they really did knock it out of the park with this ride. I know many people get upset when the ride does not duel, because if the operations aren't quick enough, it will fail to do so, but the layout is honestly so good that I tend to enjoy it nearly as much regardless. I find this roller coaster to be flawless in its layout especially, and every visit I get to Magic Mountain, I try to get a couple laps in on this ride. Twisted Colossus is such a world-class iBox creation, and I recommend it to all of you watching. Number 11, Iron Rattler at Six Flags Fiesta, Texas. It's hard for me to explain in words how amazing this ride is, especially for those of you who haven't ridden it. I know so many coaster enthusiasts that think this is an upper tier RMC, but likewise I know a lot of enthusiasts that find Iron Rattler to be on the lower end of the spectrum. In my mind, that seems impossible because this layout is just perfect. It may not be as long as some other RMC roller coasters, but what it does have in its layout with a world-class first drop, crazy airtime on and off the quarry wall, the heaven roll, the second drop, the tunnel, it's just all so good. Like, I can't think of a ride that uses its surrounding terrain better and has a better combination of elements on top of that. For being one of Rocky Mountain Construction's earliest designs, this is an impressive feat of machinery. Number 10, Top Thrill Dragster at Cedar Point. Essentially, this ride is an improved upon version of King Ka, which is pretty hilarious because it came first. I know I made King Ka out to be this perfect roller coaster, and it basically is to me, but there are still a few things that Dragster ups the fun factor with. One of those things is the addition of tiny little lap bars, which exposes your entire body to these wicked speeds and positives. Also, it's just a bit smoother. Even if King Ka isn't exactly a rough ride, it's still noticeably smoother on Dragster. Lastly, the theme is fantastic and the vibe is perfect. I love how you got the engines revving before you take off on the launch track. It's just such a great way to build anticipation. Do me a favor, guys, and next time you head to Cedar Point, get a very front row ride on this thing and throw your hands up in the air at that launch. I promise it'll be an experience you'll never forget. Number 9, Twisted Timbers at King's Dominion. Originally, I had this ride buried in the previous bunch of RMCs behind the likes of Twisted Colossus and Iron Rattler, but rewriting it this summer showed me what Twisted Timbers is truly capable of. I could not believe how much and how strong I was repeatedly getting tossed out of my seat. Like, seriously, the layout could not have been better, and none of the individual elements could have been better either. This is the definition of what rapid succession looks like on an RMC hybrid coaster, and I love the sensation more than I could describe to you guys. A back row ride on Twisted Timbers is a must for every visit to King's Dominion. Number 8, Lightning Rod at Dollywood. After my first ride this year, I was fairly disappointed and had this coaster quite a few spots lower. But as the ride began to warm up and rip through its elements at a quicker rate, it began to redeem itself. I'm telling you guys, Lightning Rod builds up its speed throughout the day more so than just about any roller coaster in the world. Two things I especially love about this ride too would be firstly the layout and how it's integrated into the terrain. When you are on the ride and you are paying close attention to how these elements are built onto the hillside, your mind will be blown. Secondly, the sequence of elements on this ride, similarly to Outlaw Run at Silver Dollar City, will focus on individual hills and elements trying to toss you up into space. The biggest difference between something like this and Outlaw Run though is that Lightning Rod has a perfect mixture of rapid succession like what you see on the quad down element and sustained moments of airtime like with what you see on the wave turn and twist and shouts. Sure, when it does come down to it, I think Lightning Rod with a bit more speed, aka how it used to ride, would be a genuine improvement. But other than that very thing, what more could you ever want from a terrain-driven, airtime-focused roller coaster layout? Number 7, Jurassic World Velocicoaster. Honestly speaking, name a roller coaster that has a better overall package than this one. It's one of the most highly themed experiences, both in the queue line and first half of the layout, amongst any coaster I've been on. Then, in the second half, the ride tears up the track with sustained ejector airtime moments, crazy fast speeds, and possibly one of the best inversions in the world, being the Mosasaurus roll. So when you have a layout like that, with the first half being the perfect buildup of anticipation and the second half being out of control, plus some world-class theming elements, come on, man. I just don't think I was expecting the Velocicoaster to make my top 10 when it first started testing, but here I am telling you guys that this is a coaster you all have to experience at some point in your life. Number 6, X2 at Six Flags Magic Mountain. This ride should be illegal, let me just start off by saying that. What this ride is essentially a fourth dimension roller coaster that allows for seat flipping 360 degrees and backflips in various rotations. Because of this technology, there's times where you are above the track and there's times where you are below it. But the craziest thing of all is that you really feel at the mercy of X2 because of its winged seating, you are flipping and sometimes don't even see track in sight. Additionally, this is one of the most intense and batshit crazy roller coasters in the world. The things that it will do to your body are unlike anything else you'll find on the continent, and I assure you that. So if you're into this kind of stuff like I am, definitely do not hesitate to give X2 a ride, preferably in the back row for the craziest experience. Number 5, Fury 325 at Carowinds. I talked about Leviathan at Canada's Wonderland not too long ago and how that was my first B&M Giga Coaster. Talking about my most recent, Fury 325 is a ride that takes Leviathan's layout and makes it even crazier. Like, considerably crazier, bigger, faster, longer, with more sustained positive Gs and overall pacing. From the second you are off that chain lift and dive down the 325-foot tall drop, you will be blazing at unfathomable speeds for a pretty good chunk of time. If there was one thing I would have liked Leviathan to do better, that would be to maintain its speed slightly better. When it comes to Fury, however, it does more than you could ever ask for in that category, and really just about any category. That is why, for me personally, this is the best B&M or Bolliger and Mabillard roller coaster anywhere in the world, and it's also one of my top 5 favorite coasters I've ever experienced. Number 4, El Toro at Six Flags Great Adventure. I only got 2 back row rides in on this thing, but what I can tell you about those 2 rides is that El Toro is one of the craziest roller coasters, definitely the craziest wooden coaster I've ever seen. Its first drop and first few camelbacks all focus on sustained ejector airtime, which is basically something straight from a dream. Then, following one of the best airtime moments in the world, the Rolling Thunder Hill, you enter the unappreciated twister section. Some say it gets overshadowed by the strength of the airtime, but somehow getting whipped low to the ground and through turns and track transitions is just the perfect complement to the rest of the course. So I can't wait to get more rides than El Toro next time I'm at the park. As far as I'm concerned, this may be the best wooden coaster on our entire planet. Number 3, Skyrush at Hersheypark. I know this ride is polarizing and I know it's not going to be for everyone, but if you ask me up front, Skyrush is one of the world's most aggressive roller coasters ever. I genuinely don't think they could have made any of these elements more intense than they already are. For starters, the first drop is one of the best in the world, followed by camelbacks that provide some of the most sustained ejector airtime hills anywhere. Then you have some wildly sustained grayout moments and numerous other transitions towards the middle that toss you around like a rag doll. People hate on the restraints all the time, which is respectable, but the way I look at it is it's keeping your lower half in position and your upper body exposed so that it can try to throw you around and kill you the best it possibly can. I do admit that this can be slightly uncomfortable, but it isn't at all a deal breaker for me, which means I can appreciate the demonically wild layout more than most people. For that alone, I find Skyrush to be Pennsylvania's crown jewel roller coaster, and dare I say, one of the world's as well. Number 2, Intimidator 305 at King's Dominion. Deciding between 2 and 1 for I-305 is so difficult nowadays, and I'll explain why a little later. To me though, no roller coaster comes closer because no roller coaster feels more intense. The things you'll experience while on this ride will leave you questioning your life and may even snap you out of reality for multiple seconds mid-ride. Intimidator 305 basically defines sustained gray out better than any coaster on Earth and does it to the point where it may be considered a little much for the most experienced thrill seekers. Combine that with the world's most insane rapid-fire transitions, aka the triple snap element, and not even to mention the speed being more sustained than possibly any ride on Earth, and you've got a real winner on your hands. Maybe not as much for everyone, like I said, it can be a little much, but I love the coaster to absolute pieces. It's one of the few rides that I've ridden and come off to take a second to breathe and just say, how can something like that exist? As of my summer 2021 rides, I am now completely convinced and am a firm believer in this being the most intense roller coaster on planet Earth. So if you dare to give I-305 a ride, brace yourself for some insanity. Number 1, Steel Vengeance at Cedar Point. I know many of you will agree, but many of you will also disagree with my number 1 placement. Most of you probably just aren't surprised, but listen, I have my reasons and personally find Steel Vengeance to be the current best coaster I've ever ridden. Let me start off by saying that I've never ridden this roller coaster with any sort of trim brakes. Throughout my dozen rides on Steel Vengeance across 2 separate seasons at the park, the mid-course brake run has never even touched my ride experience. From what I hear, this isn't the case anymore, and occasionally it will slow down your train and cause the second and my favorite half of the ride to be a bit tamer. If a ride does this, then maybe it isn't the recipe for my top spot, but it's still always going to be one of my favorites, and even until I get a reread, I'm leaving it as number 1. But away from that, why does it rank at number 1, however? What is the reason behind it? To me, it's because no roller coaster anywhere on Earth has a larger quantity of airtime, let alone ejector airtime ever. And I talked about the second half never being short of relentless for me, meaning the vast majority of these hills gave otherworldly bursts of airtime. The first half of Steel Vengeance, on the other hand, is all extremely sustained ejector, with many of the hills providing laterals in addition. So truly, how could I not give this ride the top spot, even if it is going to be the last time in a video I choose to do so? It won't be until I get a re-ride with potential trims when I reevaluate my opinion on it, but I do recognize that for many of you, this world-class roller coaster didn't provide the experience that you were expecting. As I've said though, this is all a reflection based off of my personal rides, which is why Steel Vengeance earns the top spot amongst the nearly 400 roller coasters I've ridden as of September 2021. Alright everyone, there we have it. You've made it through one of the largest countdown lists ever recorded on my channel. It was extremely difficult to put it all together, let alone ranking the top 50 coasters that I chose. So with that, I invite you all to voice your support by liking the video and subscribing to the channel if you enjoyed. Also, don't forget to leave a comment giving your thoughts and opinions on the rides and rankings down in the comments. As I promised, I will be responding to as many of you guys as I possibly can. But with that being said, thank you all for tuning in. This has been my top 50 roller coasters I've ever ridden. Till next year with a brand new updated list, I'll see you guys soon. Bye everyone.